My name is David, and never in a million years did I think I'd end up barricading someone inside my own garage. But when your neighborhood HOA president behaves like she's running a miniature dictatorship, sometimes you have to improvise. It all started at exactly 6:12 a.m. I was still half asleep when I heard the low rumble of engines pulling into my driveway. Groggy, I peeked out of my bedroom window and froze in disbelief as two beige Ford F-150 trucks brazenly rolled right into my open garage. Both bore magnetic decals that read HOA Enforcement Unit, which looked about as official as a crayon-scribbled sheriff badge. The first truck had a yapping chihuahua perched on the dashboard, decked out in a reflective vest like it was commanding a canine SWAT team. In the second sat Patricia Holbrook, our infamous HOA president, fixing her lipstick in the mirror while mouthing along to what seemed to be an inspirational audiobook. That was when my grandfather Earl, who was staying with me for the month, shuffled into the hallway. Wearing his World War II veteran cap and fuzzy slippers, he stopped, took one glance at the circus unfolding outside, and without hesitation pressed the garage door remote. The heavy door rattled shut, locking Patricia and her little entourage inside. Earl then calmly secured the outside latch and, with the same composure he'd used in war, raised his phone to his ear. "Yes, officers," he said in a voice smooth as old bourbon, sipping his morning chamomile tea. "We've got ourselves a hostage situation at 4729 Maple Ridge Drive. Entirely voluntary, I assure you." Let me backtrack a little. 6 months earlier, I'd moved into Pine Valley Estates. The realtor promised a quiet neighborhood with what she described as an optional HOA. That sounded perfect. I was a software developer working from home, and all I wanted was peace for coding and tinkering with my side hobby of building custom mechanical keyboards. The property even had a wide backyard, where I envisioned a small greenhouse to grow heirloom tomatoes. The HOA truly was optional at the time, but Patricia Holbrook never got that memo. Patricia ran around with the zeal of someone who'd discovered true crime podcasts and decided she was destined to solve crimes that didn't exist. Permanently glued to a Bluetooth headset, armed with a clipboard decorated in glitter letters spelling Compliance Crusader, she'd roped about half the neighborhood into her association. When I politely declined, I became public enemy number one. In her weekly newsletter, she branded me a rogue element threatening community standards, which was ridiculous, because my house was immaculate. My lawn was trimmed, my flower beds neatly kept, and I'd even planted native wildflowers to help pollinators. My only so-called offense was refusing to fork over $200 a month for Patricia to strut around, measuring grass height with a ruler. The harassment started small. Anonymous notes taped to my door accused me of having a non-regulation mailbox, even though mine was identical to everyone else's. Then came the drone surveillance. Patricia's teenage son, Brandon, flew it in exchange for gaming gift cards. That drone would hover right outside my home office window mid-conference call, making it look like I lived under an airport flight path. Soon after came the text chain ambushes. Somehow Patricia had gotten my number and added me to the Pine Valley HOA Updates group chat. She'd post grainy, zoomed-in photos of my property with red circles highlighting fake violations. One text pointed out that my garden hose was coiled counterclockwise. Another circled a single fallen leaf on my driveway at 7:03 a.m. with the caption, "Some neighbors respect community standards." It only escalated. At one point, she accused my friends of excessive vehicle diversity because they drove different colored cars. She even stood in my driveway with a painter's color wheel, insisting that guest vehicles should stick to earth tones to maintain the neighborhood palette. I tried to keep my cool. When she complained about my greenhouse plans under a made-up shadow ordinance, I simply showed her my city-approved permits. When she measured the distance between my trash cans and the curb with a yardstick, I waved cheerfully from the window. But then things turned serious. My garage door suddenly stopped locking properly. I figured it was just wear and tear and put off fixing it. That small oversight would turn out to be my mistake, which brings us back to that fateful morning. There was Patricia parked in my garage like it was her personal office. Her trucks filled the space. and she had even unfolded a table stacked with laminated HOA bylaws, a portable printer, and what looked suspiciously like a mobile command center. She sipped kombucha from a mason jar bedazzled with HOA President, as if she were preparing to wage battle. I threw on my robe, stormed out to the garage, and found the side door locked from the inside. Through the small window, I saw Patricia arranging paperwork like a general plotting a siege. "Patricia," I called firmly, trying to keep my temper in check, "you need to leave my property immediately." She glanced up with a frosty smile and sang back, "Oh, David, perfect timing. This garage is now under provisional HOA jurisdiction pending your compliance review. Section 14C of the Emergency Annex covers it. I can print it out for you once I'm done setting up." "There is no emergency annex," I snapped. "You're trespassing. Get out now or I'll call the police." Patricia laughed, the smug kind of laugh from someone who's never faced real pushback. "The police? Sweetheart, I have excellent ties with local law enforcement. Officer Jenkins bought cookies from my daughter's troop just last week. Besides, this is official HOA business. You can't call the cops on community improvement." That was when Grandpa Earl stepped up beside me, having listened quietly the whole time. Earl had survived Korea, plus what he called 2 HOA wars down in Florida retirement communities. He knew a petty tyrant when he saw one. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he whispered, "David, go fix yourself some breakfast. I'll take it from here." Before I could object, Earl pressed the button on his key fob. The garage door rattled down, sealing Patricia. Her assistant Keith, who I only then noticed was dozing in the passenger seat, and the Chihuahua. "Lieutenant Snuffles inside, Grandpa," I hissed nervously. "We can't just trap her in there." "We're not trapping her," Earl corrected with calm authority. "We're protecting our property from intruders who refuse to leave. Big difference. She's free to walk out the same way she came in. She just won't be taking the whole garage with her." Then, with the ease of a man ordering takeout, Earl pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and said, "Yes, hello, officers?" "This is Earl Morrison," my grandfather said in his steady, gravelly voice, "at 4729 Maple Ridge Drive, Pine Valley Estates. We've got a situation that requires immediate police attention. 2 individuals broke into my grandson's garage with their vehicles and are refusing to leave. They're claiming authority they don't actually have and are attempting to establish some kind of headquarters on private property." From inside the garage, Patricia's muffled shouting rose above the pounding of her fists against the steel door. She was yelling about illegal imprisonment and HOA protocols, but the words came through distorted and faint, like a distant radio signal. "That's right, officer," Earl continued calmly, his tone smooth as if he were ordering breakfast. "They're contained inside the garage for now, for their safety as well as ours. We felt threatened by their aggressive trespassing and didn't want the situation to escalate further. Yes, we'll wait right here for your arrival. Thank you kindly." He ended the call and, without missing a beat, handed me one of the folding lawn chairs from the porch. "Might as well settle in," he said, lowering himself comfortably into his own seat and pulling out a small bag of honey-roasted peanuts from his pocket. In my experience, it usually takes about 15 minutes for reality to start sinking in with folks like this. Sure enough, the change came quickly. Patricia's tone shifted audibly. What began as imperious, barked demands soon softened into pleading negotiations. The pounding grew weaker, replaced by desperate knocks. Through the narrow window, I caught sight of her scrolling furiously on her phone, no doubt digging through every clause of the HOA bylaws in search of some flimsy justification for breaking and entering. The police arrived in just 12 minutes. 2 cruisers pulling into the cul-de-sac with their lights flashing but sirens off. The sight drew half the neighborhood out of their homes, steaming coffee mugs in hand, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Pine Valley hadn't seen this much excitement since the Hendersons' giant inflatable Santa went up in flames last Christmas Eve. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Chen, tall and methodical, and Officer Ramirez, stockier, with a steady presence. They approached us with that professional mix of caution and curiosity, clearly trying to piece together why 2 trucks were wedged inside my garage. Earl and I calmly explained the situation, walking them through the harassment Patricia had been escalating for months. We showed them the texts, the zoomed-in photos she had spammed me with, and most importantly, the doorbell camera footage. It clearly captured Patricia's trucks rolling into my garage without invitation at precisely 6 a.m. Officer Chen ran a hand across his forehead as he tried to absorb it all. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "This woman drove into your garage with 2 trucks to set up what she's calling an HOA enforcement center, all because you refused to join an optional neighborhood club?" "That's exactly right," I replied firmly. "And now she insists she has jurisdiction over my property, even though she has absolutely no legal authority." Officer Ramirez muttered something under his breath, then stepped toward the garage. In his clear official tone, he called out, "Ma'am, this is the Pine Valley Police Department. You need to exit the garage immediately." A long pause followed. Then Patricia's voice rang out, strained but still carrying that forced authority she clung to. "Officers, thank goodness you're here! These men have unlawfully detained me during an official HOA inspection. I demand you arrest them immediately for interfering with community governance." I watched Officer Chen's eyebrows shoot upward, his face somewhere between disbelief and amusement. "Ma'am," he repeated, "please step out of the garage so we can discuss this in person." We heard fumbling inside, papers shuffling, something clattering to the ground, and Keith groggily waking up from what must have been his nap in the passenger seat. Finally, the side door creaked open. Patricia emerged, striding out like a general who had lost the war but refused to acknowledge it. She was a far cry from her polished, clipboard-toting self. The garage's humidity had left her carefully coiffed hair puffed and frizzed. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, evidence of either sweat or frustrated tears. And somehow she'd managed to knock over a sack of garden lime, leaving her navy blazer coated in a chalky powder that made her look like an abandoned statue. "Officers," she began, brushing lime dust from her sleeves, her voice still straining to sound authoritative. "I can explain everything. I have the documentation right here that proves this property falls under HOA emergency provisions in times of community aesthetic crisis." Officer Ramirez cocked his head. "Aesthetic crisis? What crisis are we talking about exactly?" Patricia waved her arms toward my house with wild exaggeration. "He's planning to build an unauthorized greenhouse. His mail carrier approaches from the wrong angle, and his Wednesday trash can placement is 7 inches off regulation." "Ma'am," Officer Chen interrupted gently, trying to cut through Patricia's tirade. "Does Mr. David here pay HOA dues?" Patricia faltered. "Well, no, but—" "And is membership in your HOA mandatory?" Chen pressed. "Not technically," she admitted grudgingly, "but community standards—" "And did you have permission to enter his garage?" Her face went through a rapid sequence of emotions, shock, outrage, defiance, before settling into indignant disbelief. "Permission? I'm the HOA president. That gives me implied consent to inspect all properties within Pine Valley's aesthetic jurisdiction." Officer Ramirez calmly flipped open his notepad. "Ma'am, what you're describing is breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and, ironically enough, false imprisonment of yourself. You've openly admitted to entering private property without permission and attempting to set up what you called a command center in someone else's garage." By now, the crowd of neighbors had doubled. Many were openly recording on their phones, while several HOA board members tapped furiously on theirs, no doubt exchanging panicked texts. "Patricia's empire was wobbling and everyone could see it. This is absurd!" Patricia shrieked, her carefully constructed composure cracking into jagged edges. "I've given 3 years of my life to protecting property values in this neighborhood. I've measured grass height in the pouring rain. I've color-coded violation notices. I even created a 37-page manual on appropriate seasonal wreaths." Keith, stumbling out of the garage behind her, looked disoriented and embarrassed. "Patricia has the community's best interests at heart," he mumbled weakly. Then quickly added, "But I had no idea where we were. I was just sleeping." It was the kind of half-defense that sounded more like a confession. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Snuffles, the so-called enforcement chihuahua, had apparently switched allegiances. He trotted straight over to Earl, tail wagging. Earl scooped him up with a chuckle and scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," he said softly. "You know a sinking ship when you see one, don't you?" Officer Chen wrapped up our statements while Ramirez photographed the scene. The two beige trucks still sat awkwardly in my garage like stranded whales. Their HOA enforcement unit decals looking more ridiculous than ever in the daylight. "Mr. David," Chen asked evenly, "would you like to press charges for criminal trespass?" I studied Patricia. Her makeup was smeared, her blazer dusted white from garden lime, her once commanding presence reduced to a desperate figure trembling under scrutiny. For a fleeting moment, pity stirred in me. But then I remembered the months of harassment, the drone surveillance, the 43 separate texts about my hedge trimming. "Yes," I said firmly, "I would." The noise Patricia made in response was somewhere between a gasp and a balloon losing air. "You can't be serious. This is a neighborhood matter. It should be resolved internally through the HOA Grievance Committee." Ramirez glanced at her with unamused patience. "The HOA you keep mentioning, one Mr. David isn't even a member of?" As the officers guided her toward the cruiser, Patricia's voice grew more frantic. "This is a conspiracy. David is sabotaging community values. Who's going to measure fence picket spacing? Who's going to enforce mailbox uniformity? Without me, this neighborhood will descend into chaos." The neighbors didn't seem too concerned about impending anarchy. In fact, Sandra from across the street muttered, "Finally. Maybe now I can paint my door whatever color I want." Keith, wisely realizing the ship had sunk, quickly agreed to cooperate. He confessed he was just Patricia's nephew, roped into what she'd described as an internship in community management for college credit. The officers let him off with a stern warning, suggesting he find an internship that didn't involve breaking into garages. Tow trucks soon arrived to haul away Patricia's enforcement fleet. She watched in horror, her empire quite literally being dragged away. Even as Officer Chen read her rights, Patricia couldn't help herself. "You have the right to remain silent," Chen began. "I waive that right." Patricia cut in loudly. "I want everyone to know this is what happens when you care too much. When you give up weekends to design outdoor furniture palettes. When you sacrifice sleep to write bylaws about driveway crack widths." Her speech continued, even as she was ushered into the police car. Her voice muffled through the rolled-up window, but still audible. A lecture about regulation shrubbery. As the crowd began dispersing, several HOA board members approached me. Margaret Wu, the treasurer, spoke first. "David, I think I speak for the entire board when I say we're terribly sorry. We had no idea Patricia had gone this far." Tom Bradley, the secretary, added quickly, "We're calling an emergency meeting tonight. Safe to say there will be major leadership changes." That evening, the Pine Valley Estates HOA WhatsApp chat, which I had never agreed to join, was buzzing with activity. I tuned into the emergency board meeting via video call, while Earl made celebratory grilled cheese sandwiches. The vote to remove Patricia as president was unanimous. Even her own vice president turned against her. The revelations were damning. Patricia had been using HOA funds to purchase the trucks, the drone, and even Lieutenant Snuffles, who was officially registered as an emotional support enforcement animal. A financial audit revealed more absurd purchases. A $3,000 laminating machine for violation notices and a subscription to an online military strategy course. In the weeks that followed, Patricia faced real consequences. She was charged with trespassing, breaking and entering, and misusing HOA funds. Her lawyer, looking defeated, tried to argue she suffered from something called excessive community enhancement disorder, a diagnosis that, unsurprisingly, didn't hold up in court. The judge, barely hiding his amusement, sentenced her to 100 hours of community service, specifically tending the public gardens at City Hall under the supervision of a professional landscaper, who was instructed to measure her work with the same obsessive standards she'd forced on others. She was also fined $3,000 and ordered to repay every misused HOA dollar. But the final blow didn't come from the court. Patricia's employer, a regional insurance company, immediately terminated her once the security footage hit the news. Her boss later told me they'd been waiting for a reason to let her go ever since she circulated a 30-page dress code for casual Fridays. Standing in the courtroom as the sentence was read, Patricia's face cycled through shock, denial, rage, and finally, something like recognition. For the first time, she seemed to understand what it felt like to be on the receiving end of rigid, unforgiving rules. "Your Honor," she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically small. "I was only trying to maintain standards." The judge's reply was sharp and final. "Ms. Holbrook, there's a difference between maintaining standards and committing crimes. $3,000 fine, 100 hours of service. Court dismissed." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a stranded fish, but no words came out.